Retrospectors, we've been plugging on this pledge drive all month, but something we haven't mentioned yet is our birthday episodes.
That's right. Our top tier members at patreon.com/retrospectors get a special bespoke 10-minute long episode of the show just for them on their birthday every year.
We love making them, and you can gift a membership as well. It's better than socks.
Sign up now for your birthday episode or a gift membership at patreon.com/retrospectors.
It's June 10th, 1752, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Ariel, Rebecca, and Ali, the Retrospectors.
What would you say Benjamin Franklin is famous for? Being a founding father of the United States, his crucial role in the American Revolution. Well, if I'd asked you that question in the 1750s, you wouldn't say those things. You'd say, oh, the Kite guy. Because it was today in history in 1752 that Franklin first made his name as a scientific pioneer, heading out into a thunderstorm to prove that lightning is a form of electricity equipped with a kite.
Yeah, and I found a great quote in the New Yorker about how electricity was viewed in the 1750s, where they said, though everyone agreed that it was a phenomenon, no one was sure at first if it was a phenomenon like the hula hoop or a phenomenon like gravity. So this is, the way that people were conceptualizing electricity at this time. There was a widespread belief that there were two kinds of electricity because there were two ways that people found it in nature most commonly. One that connected to glass. You could collect electric charge in a glass jar. In fact, that's what Franklin was doing. We'll get into that. And then there was another type of electricity that was somehow connected to resin, because you could get electric charges through amber as well. So the understanding of electricity was in its really, really early stages. But lots of people had already wondered if lightning was electricity, and if there was lightning in storm clouds. When you see forked lightning in the sky, it does look like an electrical spark. So people had this idea, but obviously, how do you get up into the clouds to see if there's electricity there? Franklin had an idea about this.
Well, okay, now we need to do a bit of debunking at some point, but let me just get to the traditional account of what happened here. So Franklin waited for a thunderstorm to gather, and then he launched his kite into the sky. This is the story. The kite was light enough to rise, but strong enough to survive wind and rain, and it had a metal point or conductive element that was designed to attract electrical charge. And as the storm intensified around him, Franklin stood beneath a shelter, holding the end of the string, and a silk ribbon insulated part of the line to reduce the risk of immediate shock, because people already knew that electricity could be dangerous.
Franklin already knew. He'd already had an electric shock a couple of years before.
Well, right. Yeah. So, and at some point he noticed the loose fibers on the string begin to stand upright. And when he brought his knuckle nearer to a key that he'd attached to the line, a spark leapt across the gap. And that spark, if indeed it occurred as described, was the crucial moment. This was evidence that electrical charge was present in the storm clouds and could be drawn down to Earth.
Okay, well, I can sense that you're about to debunk things, but before we do, let's just talk about how Franklin definitely did become interested in this, at least. A lot of the work that he did was science-ish. He was a printer by trade, but he, for example, created counterfeit-proof dollar bills, was one of the ways that he made his name working as a printer in New Jersey. So there was always a sort of technical element to what he was working on. And then the other prong is he saw a kind of travelling showman. This Scottish scientist, Archibald Spencer, doing a display of electricity, because that's what would happen then, is you'd go to your local village show and there'd be like a guy saying, "Behold!" and create sparks on the lips and things like that. And he saw that and he was fascinated by it and wanted to know, how does electricity work? I mean, that's not a question that I can answer even now, but he, with no formal training at all in the 1750s, set about a series of experiments to investigate that. And that's what led to that electric shock I was referring to on Christmas Day 1750, playing around with batteries, basically. But in the process of all that stuff, just as a sort of amateur gentleman scientist, he, for example, started using the terms positive and negative, plus and minus, instead of the words that people had used before then, which were vitreous and resinous. So, I mean, that's still with us now.
Yeah, and he actually, he wasn't just a wealthy man with too much time on his hands. He wanted to understand lightning specifically so that it could be channeled safely. You know, he was living in Philadelphia and everything was made of wood. Lightning strikes were really, really deadly, especially in a crowded city. And he had this idea that maybe lightning, if it was electricity, could then be conducted into the ground. He wasn't the first person to wonder about this possibility. The question of whether lightning was electrical had been posed by a French physicist called Jean-Antoine Nollet, who was known for this demonstration of static electricity, which he carried out in public, called the Electric Boy, in which a young man would be suspended from the ceiling using silk cords, and then electricity would be run through him. Objects could then be attached to him, and, you know, I don't know how many people were educated and how many were just entertained. But Franklin's original thought was that he could put conductor rods on roofs and use those to convey the electrical charge into a Leyden jar, which was this kind of really early crude capacitor that could hold an electrical charge. It was basically a glass jar that had metal on the inside and the outside. So the glass acted as a barrier and held that positive negative charge in place. He wrote about this idea hypothetically because there were no towers in Philadelphia that he felt were tall enough. The steeple of Christ Church, which would be around 200 feet tall, wouldn't be completed for several years. The tallest building at that time was the Pennsylvania State House. That was only about 120 feet, and he felt like it needed to be taller.
There's real Doc Brown energy to that, isn't there?
Yeah, and so, you know, like,
I need to go up the church spire, but it's not tall. What can I use? Help me, Marty.
If you believe, you know, the popular history version of events, that's when he got the idea to do it with a kite. Although I will say, in the account of the experiment that he printed in the Pennsylvania Gazette, October the 19th, 1752, you will notice that, strangely, he details all the steps you would need to perform to do the kite experiment, but he never explicitly says that he did perform it.
Yeah, this is the thing. So no detailed contemporary laboratory-style record of the experiment exists. Some historians believe that the experiment may have been conducted in a more cautious way rather than the sort of dramatic way that the legend suggests. But the image of Franklin standing in a storm with a kite has become one of these really iconic scenes in science. I suppose like Newton, like the idea of the apple falling on the head.
Yeah,
I mean, not so dramatic, an apple falling on your head, but it does convey the thing that you're trying to explain. And I think that's probably why the myth took off, because you're talking about an experiment that's very personal, that's literal. And, you know, in reality, Franklin was actually quite a cautious experimenter, and he understood the risks of direct lightning strikes. And so it's pretty unlikely that he would have placed himself in harm's way in this way. Rather, this is a romanticized story that helps explain the concept to someone who's coming at it fresh. And that was really useful at the time.
Yeah, and that explains, I guess, why generations of American school children were taught it as well, because it's a kind of like a romantic story about one of our founding fathers, and also it's a very easy to understand, relatable visual image that teaches you something about science.
Yeah, when you start looking into the account of how he did it, there are quite a lot of things that stand out as, but wait, how? He specifically says it's really important that the string not touch any door or window frame, but you do have to be inside to be sheltered from the storm. So if you imagine flying a kite in a storm, like out of a window, and you can't let the string touch the window frame, how would that work? How would a silk kite even get into the sky with it if it had an 18th century key attached to the string? The idea is that the key was attached to one of these Leyden jars to capture the charge, but how would that even work? What would that look like? And when you see illustrations of the experiment, they always skip the jar part because it just doesn't seem to make sense. But in any case, there was a more fulsome version, you know, after Franklin wrote his own account. Joseph Priestley, the English polymath, wrote this book in 1767, The History and Present State of Electricity. He basically had tried to write descriptions of all of the electrical experiments that happened so far, and he included Franklin's account and the key and the kite experiment, and that did a lot to raise the status of Franklin, because Joseph Priestley was extremely respected. He was a genius. He'd discovered oxygen. And at that time, Americans in general weren't really respected in serious academia. And Franklin was seen as a bit of an eccentric dilettante. But for his experiment to be included in this sort of annal by Priestley gave him a new status in Europe and made him respected as a scientist.
Yes, but then there did nonetheless become a kind of Brit versus Yank approach to this discovery, which is, as we were saying, really the most significant thing about all of this is that Franklin's findings, whether he did them himself or not, led directly to the invention of the lightning rod. And Franklin writes very enthusiastically about this concept, quote, "May not the knowledge of this power of points be of use to mankind in preserving houses, churches, ships, etc. from the stroke of lightning, by directing us to fix on the highest parts of those edifices upright rods of iron made sharp as a needle," note, sharp as a needle, "would not these pointed rods probably draw the electrical fire silently out of a cloud before it came nigh enough to strike, and thereby secure us from that most sudden and terrible mischief?" Set that to hip-hop, Lin-Manuel Miranda. But anyway, he said that. But the point is, you'll note, as I pause there, he was talking about sharp, pointed rods. So back in Britain, people were like, we see what this American is saying. We prefer a blunt rod. And it became this weird thing where you sort of displayed your loyalty to your country by having a blunt rod, like the king, King George III, had his palace equipped with a blunt lightning rod. Or if you were in America, one of the pointy ones. So it got politicized.
That's so funny that they were like, those idiots, nothing's going to save them from the fire in the sky with their pointy rods. You know? But I think it's just astonishing that the amount of output he had. He also was involved in the creation of the first volunteer fire department in America. He invented an instrument called the glass harmonica. It's the weirdest looking thing. It looks like a sort of peculiar sewing machine with a foot pedal and then these glass bits that swirl around. And you know when you run your finger around a glass with moisture and it makes a sound?
Oh, right, yeah.
He found a way to create an instrument that would do that. And it was so impressive to composers that people like Beethoven, Strauss and Mozart all composed pieces specifically for this new instrument.
I do think it's incredible that he invented bifocals and yet he wrote, of all my inventions, the glass harmonica has given me the greatest personal satisfaction. He invented all this amazing stuff and that was his favourite.
Yeah.
He was like, I like the fun noise it makes.
Tomorrow.
Someone had put together all the bottoms from that year sitting on the toilet and doing a wee.
Ditch the ads and get a Sunday episode when you join Club Retrospectors. Patreon.com/Retrospectors.